Hello and welcome to iOS Development Tutorials. In our first tutorial, we added a label onto our view that would just simply say I cannot be changed. In our second tutorial, we decided we can change that label. Let's do it. So what we did is we added in a button, gave it an IB action, and would change that label. And so here's the button that we created called Change Label Text, and it changes it to say, okay, maybe I can be changed. But let's say we want to create a custom message, something that we can change anytime we want to a different message. And the best way of doing that is through a text field. So that's what we're going to work on today, is how do we take a text field, add it to our view, attach it to our button with the IB action to change that text field to, or change the label field to anything we want. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is we need to make a couple changes to our storyboard. So let's go ahead and move down our button here a bit, and we'll add on a label so we can remember what our text field was for. And then we're going to take a text field and add it to our storyboard here. And that's it. That now has added a text field to our storyboard. But it won't really do anything yet. And the reason is because we don't have any way for our code to get at the text field text value. So if we need to do that, as we've learned from the second tutorial, is we need to create a property, something that we can either get and set so we can see what the values are. So let's go ahead and go over here to our editor buttons, and we'll open up the assistant. And with our text field selected, we'll hold down Control and add a property, and let's call it say, just as it is, custom status, and we'll say connect. So that now will give us a way to get at this outlet of the text field and set and get the information that we have. Let's go ahead and save on all of these files that we just edited, and over here to the viewcontroller.m. Now we know that when we click on the button, it uses this IB action here of button pressed, which I think is a good way to constantly keep the two working together. So what we're going to do is, instead of deleting out this way of going at the text currently, let's just kind of comment it out and we'll create a new way of doing it. So just as we did before, we have the self.statuslabel.text. So we know that's what we're wanting to key in. So we'll start with that part, so self.statuslabel.text, and it's equal to something. And it's, what do we want this to be equal to? Well, we know that we have our self, which is the view that we're working with, and then the new custom status text field that we did is the next part. This is what we just created. So we'll say custom status. And what do we want to get out of it? Well, we want to get the text value. And then we end in our semicolon. So if we were to run this currently as it is, if we change our custom status, and let's say to hello world, and now we say it, we see that our label has changed to hello world. But there's something peculiar going on. The keyboard doesn't go away. The problem with Xcode, or actually I would say it's a benefit of Xcode, is that after you've worked with a text box or a text field, the keyboard stays up by default. You have to tell it to go away, which is nice when you're moving from field to field, that it doesn't constantly go up and down every time and can really create a bad user experience. So how do we get this keyboard to go away when we're done? Well, there's a couple ways of doing that as well, but there's really two big ways that we do it. One is you can either resign the first responder, which means whenever the your first call towards that keyboard goes and it's finished with it, then it goes away. But the other way, which is a little bit easier to remember, is end editing. So what we want to do is for self.customStatus, we're just going to simply say end editing and say yes. So now let's run it. And you'll see that once we've done it, it took that custom status call and said in editing, we're done with the keyboard, put it away. And then as soon as we come back to it, it brings it right back up. Now the other part is this return. So we can type in anything we want, but when we click on return, it doesn't do anything to our keyboard. Well, we've set up the label to do all the work, but we haven't told the keyboard what it needs to do when it's doing all its work. So let's look at that. We'll go ahead and say stop again. We'll come back over here to our storyboard. If we click on our text view and we come over here to all the different events and things that we can do, we'll see that there's a few of them. We have values change, the touches, the touch downs, the touch drags, and then we have this editing information. So what if we did the did edit on exit, and we'll drag that over here to our view controller, and we're going to add it to the button pressed IB action. Now what happens to it whenever we hit that enter button? So we come back in here, we say hello world once more, and we say return. Now we'll see that that return button ended up setting our status, and it hid the keyboard. So just as it does with our buttons, you have all these send events to where you can change your editings, you can do all your touches, you can even say as much of, if a value is changed, I want you to do this to a string or to an integer value. But the one that we want to concentrate on to hide the keyboard is the did end on exit. So in other words, as we've finished doing our exit, we've hit that return key, we're done with all the work we want to do in it, this is what I want you to do with the text. So that's the best way to end up hiding a keyboard and to change your status to a custom status. Now there's a couple other things that we can also do just to kind of make a better user experience. In our viewcontroller.m, so we changed it and commented out this value and said instead of this value we're going to use the custom text. But what if the custom text was blank and we still wanted to have that as the default? Well, what we can do is we can create a IfThen statement to do that work for us. So let's take a peek at how to do an IfThen statement. If we say if self.customStatus.text equals ns string, and we'll say string with format, then we're going to do something, and else we're going to do something else. So what we're saying is if this custom status.text is equal to, now remember, if we're doing this in any kind of comparison, we use two equals and not just one. So is equal to a string that has a string text of nothing. So in other words, if the custom status text is blank, then what we want to do is something here. Otherwise, if it's not blank, we're going to do this code down here. So we have this line that we've commented out, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut it and put it here. So if we did not key anything in the custom, then this is what I want you to say by default. Otherwise, this else statement, we're going to place it here. So once again, if our custom status text is equal to nothing, then I want you to just say, okay, maybe I can be changed. Otherwise, I want you to take that text of custom status and I want you to apply it to that status label, and then I want you to hide the keyboard. So let's give that a shot and see what that looks like. So first of all, it says I cannot be changed, and if we click it, it says okay, maybe I can be changed. And then I can come in here and change it once more to hello world, or I can change it again if I like to hello world again. Those are just the basics of setting up a text box and to hide the keyboard. Now there's one piece though that we did not talk about that I'd kind of like to talk about real quick. We know that through using the keyboards, there's several different kinds of keyboards that we can use within iOS. If we select on our text box again, our text field, and we come over here to our properties and scroll down a bit, there they are, you'll see that we have a couple different types of keyboards that we can use. If we wanted to create a keyboard that was designed for email addresses, for instance, and we can click on it and then let's run it, we'll see that there is a difference to the keyboard. The big difference is you'll see that there's an @ symbol down here as well as a period right there ready to go. We can also change it from email address and say a number pad. So let's say we're wanting to have it as a phone number or even keying in for a calculator. We'll see, here's our number pad. This part here of changing your keyboard makes it easier for the user experience. If you're wanting them to key in a particular format, then you can already set up the keyboard for that itself and have it ready to go. In other words, if you're wanting them to type in a URL, give them a URL keyboard, making it easier. If you're wanting them to sign in and you have a email address as their username, then go ahead and give them everything they need with the email address text field or keyboard style. That way, there's less buttons they have to click through to get to what pieces they need. Now, it very much is just a very simple thing of, well, they can just click on the symbol button to click the app. But if you already put it on the home screen, it makes it that much faster and a little bit nicer user experience for them. The other thing that you can set is this return key. There are a few different return keys that you can also use. If we wanted to create a search box, and that way as soon as they do it, they hit Google, they know that to go to search on Google. What we can do is set that particular return key to something quickly as well. So now we'll see it says search instead of return. If we wanted it to be, let's say, send, and we click on it, you'll see now it says send. Now the thing about it is the key is still the same. It's still doing the end editing. So if I can still say hello, you'll see it still says hello. So it's still the same key as far as code is concerned. You're still going to use this did end on exit as far as the button press. All you're doing is you're changing what you want the text to actually read. So depending on what the text box is for, you might want to change it to make it a little bit easier on the user experience itself. The last piece of information is cleaning up our code a little bit. Now you'll see that in here we have a lot of this self dot stuff. But there is a better way and actually a cleaner way of doing this self dot to where you just have to say custom status or custom label. And to do that, what we're going to do is we have these properties over here in our header file of status label, not sure how that got there, and custom status. What we want to do to create it to where we don't have to keep doing the self stuff is we want to synthesize those particular properties. And basically what synthesize means is let Xcode automatically create the get and set methods. And what I mean by that is right now we are doing a dot status label dot text equals. This is a set method. We are telling iOS to take something and set it over here. Whereas on this side, we are calling a get method. Get this, set it to this. And so when we invoke the self dot, that's ultimately what we're doing. But we want to keep it cleaner. We want to make it to where instead of saying self dot every time, we can apply that through the code itself. And so that's what we do with the synthesizing. So if we say at synthesize, and we'll give our property itself of status label, and we want to give it a name. We can call this anything we want. So if we just want to even call it SL, we could. But as far as for cleanliness of the code or remembering what is what we'll do is we'll do an underscore, and then we'll say status label. The reason why we want to keep it the same name is so we remember what's mapped to what, but the underscore lets us know that this was a property that we are assigning. It's not something built into Xcode, but it's something that we had created. And then we'll do the same thing for our custom status is equal to underscore custom status. And we'll end that in a semicolon as well. So now what we can do is instead of this self dot, we can now say underscore custom status on all these and underscore status label. So now what we've done is we've cleaned up the code a little bit. We have synthesized our properties to something that will still create the get and set methods for us automatically, but at the same time we don't see this self dot all over the place. It just looks cleaner. So now if we run our code, it should still work just as it has been. If we say this, okay, it can be changed. We can then say custom status here. We'll say send, and we'll see that says custom status here. So this is it. This is the quick basics of a text box. Connecting it to an IB action, setting up an if-then statement, having our synthesizing going on so we don't have to keep using the self dot all over the place, and how to change the look and functionality of our keyboard around a little bit to help the user experience. What we want to do in the next tutorial is how can we now do a little bit of customization. So far we've worked with everything just as it comes out of the box. We have a white background, basic colors to our buttons, a custom, or our label itself that we're using is set to the same text as what we've added. But what if we wanted to change colors and sizing? We've wanted to change the font styles. What if we wanted to change all that? And that's what we're going to look at in our next tutorial, is how to actually start with a little bit of the customizing and working with some of those basic functions of changing the color. So rate, subscribe, like it, and come see us in our next tutorial.